Hello, this is Julie again. I'm going to give a summary of the first lecture on dynamics of group work as part of Module 1. This is really an overview talking about what are some of the components of groups, how do we define group work, and what we'll be looking at for the rest of the semester. First and foremost, I just want to highlight to you the text, which is Toseland and Rivas, which is Introduction to Group Work Practice. If you don't have that text yet, there are also ebooks available, and I encourage you to, if you can't get hold of the text, to actually access it through the library. And if you get an old copy of that text, that's also quite acceptable. I'm actually looking at the PowerPoint slides in LearnLine at the moment, and they're just highlighting a few points that I'll bring to your attention. That by the end of this unit, you should be able to demonstrate your own understanding of the theory of group work, be able to articulate the process and the dynamics of group work, and also be able to articulate the frameworks and typology of group work. Also, you'll be expected to critically evaluate group work as it applies to practice. While our student base is made up of people studying humanitarian studies as well as social work, there's a reference on slide 4 to the AASW standards that provides a good link to how groups should be conducted and some of the practice standards for social workers. The focus of group work practice is to really provide a generalist approach and to also look at how to practice with a broad range of treatment and task groups, and also application and connection with other generalist social work, and how to integrate specialist skills for group work. We'll also be looking at interactional and situational leadership. One of the key things in this unit that we will be covering at a later date is the ethics of group work, but we will be talking about this throughout the unit. The focus of group work practice is influenced profoundly by a system of both personal and professional values, and there's a range of ethical considerations in the context of running groups. This will be considered throughout the unit. Even the way that we set up the room, the way that a session starts, the way that people are greeted, the way that people are spoken to, all of these things will reflect the ethics that you bring to your practice. Defining group work, I'm having a look at slide 10, and defining group work is looking at how specifically group work is goal-directed activity with small treatment and task groups aimed at meeting socio-emotional needs and accomplishing tasks. This is a quote that comes from the core text, and it's about a deliberate use of intervention strategies and group processes to accomplish goals. The significance around this definition is that it's deliberate, that it's planned, and that there's an expectation that goals will be achieved. There are other definitions around groups. For example, the size of a group might refer to 2 people, a dyad of triad, 3 people, or to large collectives such as a class, a mob, an audience. People can be connected and networked, and also there can be interpersonal connection. Contracts or agreements, I'm on slide 12 now. Contracts or agreements. Contract tends to be the American term. Agreements is perhaps a more commonly used term. Contracts can be between the group members about how the group members will behave. It can also be between the group and the organisation. It can be between the worker and the group members. It can also be between one group member and the whole group. Having a contract clarifies the purpose and the goals of the group, and also clarifies how the group will actually operate. What are the things that are important? What are the behaviours? What are the changes? What are the values that we should pay attention to? In the group that we're running in Darwin, we set up a contract or agreement or group rules with the people attending that class by talking about some of the things that we thought were important, such as respect, such as listening to others, such as being punctual, allowing difference. You will see in your study guide a number of these principles that are listed, and it's important even when interacting with fellow students, when posting online material, to be aware of what are the values that are important for that particular group to operate well. So a contract can also be between a group member and the rest of the group, particularly if someone is wanting to address change in their behaviour. They may actually speak about that with the rest of the group, and one example of that could be that a group member might say, when I'm in a group and when I get angry, I tend to swear. I really want to learn not to do that while I'm in this group. I'm letting you know, the rest of the people in the group, I'm letting you know that I'm working on this. I'm going to make a contract with you that I'm not going to swear when I'm in this group. While that might seem a bit flippant, that can be an example of a group contract where a member makes an agreement with other group members to address a particular behaviour. It's an opportunity, particularly though, for the whole group and the facilitator or leader to talk about the values under which they want that group to operate. As a reflection, on slide 14, just think about some of the groups that you're part of. Maybe you're not part of a group, or maybe you are part of groups at the moment, or maybe you've been part of groups in the past, and think about what does belonging to a group, what does being part of a group, what does that mean to you? What's been your experience of being in a group? It may even be worth jotting down some of those points. Perhaps it was that you felt heard, you have felt valued, you felt you had a common sense of support from sharing your experience with others. Perhaps it was fun. I don't know. Just think about what that's been like for you to be part of a group. There's many different types of groups. People can intuitively draw a distinction between, personal groups, intimate groups, task groups, loose associations, and more general categories. And there are obviously many, many groups in the world. There's one distinction that Cooley used. I'm looking at slide 16 now, between primary and secondary groups. Primary groups, particularly being groups that are small, long-term groups, characterised by high level of interaction and cohesiveness. For example, families, close-knit groups, close friends, even a gang can be a primary group. A secondary group is referring to a larger, less intimate, more of a goal-focused group, typical in more complex societies. So a congregation at a church, a work group, a union, or professional associations. They may be some of the examples of those. I'm looking at slide 18 and slide 19. There's some other definitions, I guess, around different types of groups that you can have a look at, around groups that might be planned or founded, for example, a group that's founded by one person who stays in the group, a study group, a business group, a club or association, groups that are self-organising. And slide 19 has more examples again of different types of groups and different terms that you will become familiar with as you do this unit. Task groups, for example, are groups that in employment settings people might get together and focus on particular issues. It might be teams, it might be neighbourhood associations. Weak associations can be people just happen to be in a particular time and place, and it's very brief. what are some of the common characteristics of groups? We're on slide 20 now. A key thing about groups is that there's interaction, that people are interacting with each other. There's a relationship and there's a purpose or there's a task. This also can be a sense of interdependence, that people have expectations around those interactions about what they're going to actually achieve or what they're going to get from each other. There can be structure around what we actually do, who does what, what's normal behaviour in our group, and how we relate to each other. There's also goals. There's generating goals, choosing those goals, negotiating what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, who's going to do what. So that's clearly linked to the purpose. Groups are systems. They create and they organise and sustain interaction amongst members. The task interaction is where actions are performed by individuals pertaining to groups' tasks and goals. Relationship interaction is referring to actions that are performed by the whole group, relating to the emotional and interpersonal bonds. Something to be really aware of in this unit is that many disciplines study group dynamics. It is not owned by or doesn't sit in one discipline. Psychology, sociology, political science, anthropology, business and organisational studies, all of these areas have both studied and very much influenced the practice of group work. There are two terms that you will see coming up in your reading of the text and throughout this unit. Two main types of group work. When we're talking about group work, remember we're not talking about the spontaneous collection of people. We're now talking about the deliberate, planned, intentional organising of people into groups for a purpose. In this slide 23, the task group is around meeting clients' needs, or it could be around meeting an organisational need, or it could be meeting community needs. There's a purpose for it. Treatment groups usually refers to support groups, education groups, personal growth groups, therapy groups, socialisation groups, and self-help groups. A key question for you to consider is, why do we do group work? And I'm looking on slide 24. And it's been argued that group work is a really powerful adjunct or complement to individual work or therapy, that it can actually help or assist people with almost anything that therapy or counselling can, providing it's an appropriate and a positive experience for people. It also can help people realise that they're not alone with their own problems, and that in itself can be a major experience for people in terms of empowerment and for them experiencing hope and then being able to address change in their lives. Allowing people to hear that others have got similar concerns can really shift things for people. They also give people the opportunity to be supportive to others, to give feedback to others, to make suggestions, to interact with people around a particular issue. And as people give and receive that help, they also observe how others are achieving their goals or how they're addressing change. And that presence of noticing what's happening for others can be a very hopeful experience for people that often isn't as easy to observe in individual treatment. Being part of groups also allows people to engage in reality testing, that people can try out new skills and practice in a group setting. On slide 26, why we do group work. Groups themselves can develop into social microcosms where people can actually experience who they are and how they are in a safe group context by having space from the issues or the problems that are impacting them outside the group. We also have to be aware too that groups can also encourage conformity, that there can be very strong norms and mores in a group that may not allow difference, that sometimes they can encourage dependency, vulnerability, or maybe scapegoating or blaming on others who are not actually present in the group. And also if groups are not done well, if they're not facilitated well, they can actually allow talkative people to dominate, which can actually take away from the experience of others in the group. People in treatment groups particularly can benefit when they have an ability to communicate with others and when their own concerns or problems motivate them to be part of talking with others and part of group discussion. When we're thinking about task-focused or more than non-therapeutic groups, there are many reasons why a group can achieve a lot more than an individual can. When you've got more people in the room, there's more skills, there's more experience, there's more viewpoints and knowledge to bring to an issue. Again, ideas can be tested in that group. And a large task can be shared by many people, allowing people to be responsible for different parts of the task and making the personal workload lighter. In summary, why we do group work, it's a diversity of views and ideas that can be particularly empowering, and that can enable people to get things done or to address change. It's also an opportunity to practice and model ethical decision making in a shared and a safe environment. It can be fun and interactive. Through the shared values and sense of belonging, people can achieve a sense of change, can achieve addressing issues in a way that they can't on their own. Also in a group context, there's a space for achievements to be celebrated and acknowledged. Next week we'll be looking at the theories that have informed group work practice. Bye.